that there's some little nugget there for you to take away and say, aha, hadn't thought about that. So I've broken, and by the way, it's basically a two-series presentation. Next week, we're going to look at tactics and strategy. And again, not to make this too complicated, but rather just to talk about some of the things that I think about before heading out onto the race course, some of the preparation that I go through, and when we get out there, what are the things that you need to be thinking about to get around the track successfully, safely, and so forth. So, but today we're going to talk about what I call a five-step approach to getting yourselves and your crew ready to go out for that first race of the year, which is only a couple of weeks away now. And then followed by a discussion, and again, not getting too deep into the weeds, because Lord knows I'm not an expert in this regard, but talk about the rules of part two, or most of part two, which are the rules in the RRS racing rules of sailing, which deal with when two boats meet. So we'll probably take a short break before we start the rules, so you can freshen up the dark and stormies, or the coffee, or whatever you're enjoying at this time of the morning. So hopefully people have logged in. Do we have a pretty good list of people? I know there are a lot registered, and of course there's 32, always
32 people. So
difficulty. How many have we got?
32.
32. So there's more people going to check in with us, hopefully. But I'll get started now. By the way, we've set aside 2 hours. I don't know that I can talk for 2 hours and remain interesting. So we'll just go through the presentation, and we encourage you to stop and ask questions. And you know, if I've got the answers, I'll give them to you. If I don't, I'll make a note and get back to you later. So unless there's any questions before we get started, anything, you're going to see that in the chat.
Yep. Yeah, if you have a question, just put it in the chat for everyone, and I'm watching it down there. And in the interim, just go ahead and mute your microphones if they're not already, so you don't get any feedback.
And can people just give us a thumbs up if the sound is okay? You're hearing me okay? Good, thank you. All right, so let's get started, what I call the five-step approach. And the first one, it seems so basic, but read the sailing instructions. The sailing instructions is a wealth of information, and you know, you don't have to read all of the racing rules. You don't have to read the RRS in order to be able to prepare for a race if you look at everything that's in the sailing instructions. So that's the first thing. And yep, the next thing is get a handle on the starting sequence, RRS 26. And we use the standard starting sequence that's used all over the world. And what I encourage is not only the skippers, but the crew also become very familiar with the RRS 26. Next slide. And this seems rather obvious, but it's really important that you have some clue before you leave the office on Wednesday, or before you leave home on Saturday morning, Sunday morning, whatever it is, that you take a look at the weather forecast. And I'll go into that a little bit more as we get into the presentation. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about crew positions and responsibilities. And again, not diving into the weeds, but just drawing your attention to some of the things that I think about when I'm preparing the crew and when I'm out there with the crew. What are we up to? And then finally, know the basic rules of the road. So we'll take a quick break before we get to that part of the presentation. And as I said, we're just going to talk about part two of the RRS. And if you've got your RRS with you, you know, open it up and make sure you're following along. All right, so let's get to next slide. Have we got any questions? No?
Nope.
No, we're good?
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
Sorry.
So this is a quick screenshot basically of the Wednesday night sailing instructions. At the top, all of the dates that are scheduled for this particular series, and for each weekend race, there's a separate sheet in the sailing instructions manual that talks about the date and the times, which is really important. Showing up at 10 o'clock in the morning for a race that starts at 2 can be a little embarrassing. So just check to make sure you know what time the races are scheduled to start. This sailing instruction talks about which classes will be starting, the order in which the classes start, and the approximate time that the starting sequence for each class will start. And there's a 5-minute starting sequence. We'll go into that next with the RRS. Very often we'll indicate where the race committee will be initially setting up. And so there's a rendezvous indication in the sailing instructions. Now these things can change. The weather can force some decisions to be made on the race course. I would encourage those who are doing race committee to get on the radio when they get out on the bay, usually early and ahead of other races getting out there, and just give people a heads up to say, hey, listen, this is where we're located. This is especially important on Wednesday nights. We're out in the bay 2 miles, and it's going to be hard to see us, but we're approximately south of Green 1 or north of Harrington Harbour C or HHSA C. Just give people an idea where you're set up. And then an indication of where the finish will be. Again, these can change depending on weather conditions. Races can finish on a shortened course, but only ever at a mark that you have to round anyway. So there's not going to be a mystery about where the finish will be under normal circumstances on a Wednesday night. And for most of our races, in fact, the finish is at HHSA. And then it talks about whether or not there's a time limit for these races. And you can see that we will declare time limit expired at, in this case, 8:30 in the evening, so that the race committee is not sitting out there till midnight waiting for stragglers to finish. We'll encourage you to come in and get to the bar as quickly as you can, and hopefully during daylight. What's the next one?
Protests.
Oh, protests. Yeah, we discourage those, but sometimes there's a protest, and so there's always a mention of the protest time limit. Some of these things we put in there because US sailing and world sailing define the elements of sailing instructions. So we include some of these things just because we should. It talks about awards, and if there's going to be a gathering after the races, it usually identifies that there'll be some gathering somewhere. Now, COVID last year spoiled all of those plans. Hopefully this year, we're going to be able to safely gather at Skipper's on a Wednesday night. They've in the past accommodated the races, keeping the kitchen open late and allowing us to come in after normal hours and enjoy a dark and stormy and a cheeseburger or something, or tacos. Anyway, read the sailing instructions, but not only the skippers. I encourage the crew to also read the sailing instructions. And the reason for this may not at first be obvious, but if you're the only one on the boat who knows what the starting sequence is, I'm talking to the skippers, the owners. If you're the only one who knows what the starting sequence looks like and what the flags look like, then you're spending too much time answering their silly questions. When's our start? What's the course? Etc. Then you're not concentrated on your job, and it just it gets everybody involved. If they're all watching the flags go up and down on the race committee, if they all know where the first mark is and are focused on where we're going after we start the race. So it just cuts down on a lot of the chatter, the needless chatter, if everybody's reading from the same page. So that's it on the sailing instructions. Seems rather obvious, but there's a lot of good information in there, and I encourage everybody to take the time to look at it and figure out what's going on. Next slide. So RRS 26, you can look it up. If you haven't got a copy of the RRS, you can go online and do so. But this is basically what RRS 26 describes. And it's a 5-minute starting sequence. And I think on the race committee, you can see a red and yellow flag. That's the R flag. So this would be on a day where we would be having more than one race. And so after the finish of the first race, race committee has posted the R flag to indicate there's another race. Under normal circumstances, on a Wednesday night, for example, or on the first race of a multiple race regatta, there would be a Lima flag, and that's the black and yellow checkered flag, which indicates that follow me, come within hail, and check in and so forth before the starting sequence. But that flag gets lowered 1 minute before your first starting sequence. So it's the R flag, it's the Lima flag. Sometimes it's the AP, which means we've had a delay, and AP, which is the cat in the hat flag. It gets lowered 1 minute before the starting sequence. So come to Ted's race management, race committee seminar. When is that, Michelle?
April 17th.
April 17th. And there'll be more discussion about flags. But today I just want to, instead of complicating things, talk about, hey, there's a 5-minute starting sequence. And the beginning of the 5-minute starting sequence for your class is raising your class flag. And down at the bottom, I've indicated the class flags that we use typically here at HHSA. The first one is the 5 flag to indicate non-spin, and this year non-spin racing, because we've split the non-spin classes into 2. And so we've got non-spin racing and we've got non-spin cruising indicated by the white flag. And whilst it's nice if you have a flag to fly off your backstay to indicate what class you'll be starting in, it's useful for the race committee to understand your intentions with an indication of a flag on the back of the boat. But it also lets other competitors know that you're in, for example, Spinnaker class, and that you're in a starting sequence, and anyone with a 5 flag or a white flag should not be in the starting area during the starting sequence of the preceding class. So not a requirement to do that, but certainly be looking on the race committee for your warning signal. 5 minutes to go before your start. So after 1 minute, the prep flag, the P flag, Papa, is raised, and it stays up for 3 minutes. So 1 minute before your start, you will see Papa flag come down. And the flags going up and down are always accompanied by a horn. So if you start hearing sounds and flags going up and down, you better be paying attention. And this is where your crew can help. If you've missed the start of your 5-minute sequence and somebody says, hey, the 5 flag is up, that's our start. So be ready then, because you're less than 1 minute away to Papa coming up. If you look up and Papa is not there anymore and your class flag is there and that sequence has been going on for a while, you know that you're within 1 minute of the start of your starting sequence. And don't be 3 minutes away from the starting line when Papa comes down. So these are the things that you'll figure out as you practice your time and distance exercises to get a handle on being in the right place at the right time for your start. And so at the end of 5 minutes, class flag comes down, and if there's another class starting, then the warning signal, the class flag for the next starting sequence will go up. So there's simultaneous flag coming down, flag going up. And then there's the opportunity for the race committee to be paying attention, because you're not supposed to be over the line early. So there's two flags that you should look for, accompanied by a horn from the race committee after the horn indicating the end of your 5-minute sequence. If there's a horn and you look around and this flag, the blue cross on the white background, is up, it means that somebody was over early. And with a bit of luck, the race committee is going to indicate on the radio sale numbers or boat names of anybody who was over early. And your obligation at that point is to turn around and come back. We can talk about, and we'll talk about your obligations and the constraints you face when turning back into the face of the boats that have started correctly. The main one is stay the heck out of the way. Don't foul anybody that has started correctly while you're trying to get back and start properly. And then in the event that the race committee cannot identify a number of boats that were over early, then they will indicate a general recall. And so this, what is this, the second repeater flag, yellow and blue, will be raised. And that indicates that the race has been stopped, abandoned that start, and invitation for everybody to get back. And they will indicate a new starting sequence, and that flag will be lowered 1 minute before the start of the next starting sequence. And what we do here at Harrington Harbour is, if the first class that starts has a problem and it has a general recall, then we just reset the starting sequence. So they will still be the first class to start. We just hit the reset button, get everybody set up, and we'll go again. So that's the starting sequence that not only you, the skipper, but also the crew. And I think today we have a lot of crew checked in with us today. I would encourage everybody to get a handle on the starting sequence. It'll take so much pressure off everybody if everybody on the boat knows what's going on and there's no silly questions. Where are we in the starting sequence? We don't want to hear that. Or if we do, we want somebody to quickly answer. So next slide, unless there's any questions. So here's the look at the weather forecast slide. As I said, I always, before I even leave home or the office, I don't have an office anymore, which is great. But I always check the weather forecast, even check the day before. But what you're looking for here is, because let's face it, weather forecast is not very accurate. If they can be, hitting 500, then it seems to me they're doing a good job. But the closer we get to starting time, the more accurate the weather forecast is likely to be. So I'm checking several sources, not just one. And if you look on the Harrington Harbour Sailing Association website, where is it, Jason? There's a list of
member resources and then weather.
So unfortunately, somebody made a decision a couple of years ago to make some of this information visible only to members. But if you log in, you'll see a page that says member resources, and in there you'll find some very helpful hints. Click on links to weather forecast, tidal information, and so forth. So check all your sources before you leave home, before you leave the office. And then when you get to the dock, have another look, have a look around, see what's going on and see what's changed. And then of course, when you get out on the water, have another check because sometimes these things are updated and will give you an update that's perhaps a little closer to reality, but you're also checking when you get out there. And that's what I say, monitor any changing conditions. sailboat racing is about optimizing this invisible thing called air to attach flow onto your sails to generate lift and move the boats forward. So if you can get a handle on what's happening to the wind before you start, and then of course after you've started, you'll have a leg up on somebody who's not paying attention. You know, is there a shift to the left? Is there a shift to the right? Make sure you know what you would do in those situations, and just be aware that the wind is rarely, and if anybody watched the America's Cup recently, they showed wind graphs to show even small changes in the wind direction. If you are aware of those, you can take advantage of them. And we'll talk more about that next week. So just keep an eye on what's going on out there. The other thing that I always try to get a handle on is what's happening with the current. And you can check to see when high tide is. High tide is an indicator of when, or low tide, when water is most likely to be at the top of the chart, or low tide at the bottom of the chart. But wind plays a huge role in what's happening with current, irrespective of tides. So you want to get a handle on what's happening with current. And you know, the prevailing wind for us on Wednesdays throughout the season appears to be out of the southeast, am I right? And so the start is invariably going to take you south towards Herring Bay Green 1, or on good weather, good wind, long daylight days, then we're going to go out to 81A, which puts you into, you know, about 25. If you go beyond, you know, the line to 81A, you're going to be out in 30 feet of water. If there's a ripping current on a flood tide and you go out there, then just understand that the wind better be pretty good there in that location, or you're going to be bashing up against current that people who have gone into the shallows around Holland Point have managed to stay out of. So local knowledge is key, and I'll talk more about that next week. But you know, just be aware of the current, and it's also important when you get to that turning mark, whether it's you know, 81A or 83A or whatever, understand that there's probably going to be some current out there from one direction or the other. The other thing I'll tell you is that in Herring Bay, there'll be different current from the current that's out in the bay itself. And again, talk more about that next week. So know where the deep water is, know what current is likely to be happening in that either deep water or shallow water, and then local knowledge. Get out there, and if you see boats that are always winning, make a note of what they're doing, because they're probably onto something that you should probably tap into as well. So there you go. Weather and current. So crew positions. Now I'm going to direct, you know, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, direct the presentation towards the novice who's, or the cruiser who's thinking about using his boat more often and coming out on a Wednesday, which, you know, is the way a lot of us got started, frankly. And so you can actually sail a boat single-handed, a lot of you. And certainly many of you on a weekend will go out and you and your wife or your mate or significant other, probably not with your wife and significant other, but you can sail the boat short-handed. When you're racing, you need a few more people, ideally, unless you're competing in the short-handed class, to get the boat safely and efficiently around the track. And so for those thinking about coming out to race, non-spinnaker, then 4 or 5 people is really what you would look to have on the boat. And not everybody needs to be a rock star, but you know, the obvious ones: the driver, the mainsail trimmer, the head sail trimmer, the tailer. That's the, you know, the one that grabs the jib sheet and hauls it in on a tack or a jibe. And then if you have the luxury of a fifth person, having somebody at the mast to help the jib around on the tacks and the jibes is very useful. Now, if you're going to fly spinnaker, some people put ungodly numbers of people on their boat, like that blue boat. We usually carry 9 people, but you don't need that. And certainly, if you're getting started, think about 4 or 5 people. So let's go to the next one. And there's a couple of points I want to make here. And some of this seems quite obvious. You know, the helm, it drives the boat focused on boat speed and telltales. And he talks to the trimmers. So when you're out cruising, maybe you're focused on the telltales. You know, I see a lot of cruising boats, and my wife Emily, you know, will comment on, we go past cruising boats, and there's a lot of noise coming from flapping sails because they're not trimmed properly. And so if you want to race, I encourage the skipper, the driver, but over keep the trimmers focused on telltales, and telltales on a jib from top to bottom. And so if the top of the jib is flapping and the bottom looks good, then, you know, that's what I say with the head sail trimmer, adjusting for changes, but also adjusting car position. So when you get out on the water, I will tell you, your jib cars, general cars, should be in about the same place on both sides of the boat. And it's funny, I often see boats where jib car positions are not identical on either side of the boat. It's where they ended up the last time somebody moved them, and that's where they stay. I'm just telling you that there's an awful lot you can do to improve your performance by being focused on keeping the sails trimmed. So mainsail trimmer wants to make the main look good, and that's not, you know, a throwaway statement. If the main looks good, it's probably doing its job, so long as you're not over trimmed, because an over trimmed main can often look very good. But if the main is eased out too far and things are flapping and the telltales are jumping around all over the place, the telltales on the back of the sail, then you maybe we need to make some changes. So the mainsail trimmer talks to the driver. Here's what I'm feeling, and you know, what do you think? Head sail trimmer focused on the telltales, car position, adjusting for the changes, because the wind is never constant. Talks to the driver and the main trimmer, and is probably the crew member that releases the head sail on attack. So he you know, goes from side to side during attack, releases, and then goes to the other side to grind. And the tailer gets the jib sheet hauled in during the tack of the jibe. And believe me, you can make up a lot of time on other boats with good tacks and good jibes, tacks in particular. If your tailer has good hand-eye coordination and can get that jib sheet hauled in most of the way before the winch has to be used. And then there's the mast that helps, as I said, helps the head sail around the standing rigging. Next slide. So I've highlighted in this one, talks. This is about communication. And so you don't want a lot of idle chit chat, especially at the start on that first leg when boats are sailing fairly close together. But you do want communication to make sure that everybody's getting the boat going as well as possible, given the conditions, given who you've got on the boat in terms of crew. And so I highlight the need here for communication, and to make sure that, because, you know, the driver probably isn't looking at telltales, isn't looking at how well the sails are trimmed. So we need him talking or getting feedback from the mainsail trimmer and the jib trimmer. So that's the point I'm trying to make here. Communication is really, really important. The reality is that when you go out on a Wednesday night or on a weekend race, and hopefully we're going to have 30 boats out. you know, we had a big surge last year, especially with cruising boats that are coming out to race and people coming out to race for the first time. So you have to have really realistic expectations, I think. And I bring this up at this point because if we get 30 boats out there, you know, there'll be 25% of those that will be hopeful and optimistic that maybe they'll get themselves into a position or be lucky enough to, you know, get up in the on the podium, as they say, or even win the race. But the vast majority of the people coming out, they're not going to win. But the reason you're out there is lots of different reasons. There are super competitive people out there who really do want to figure out how to get this sailing stuff nailed and do as well as possible. And there are others who just want to go out there because it's the middle of the week. They can spend some time with some friends. They may, you know, have a beer or a rum drink. Maybe not during the course of the race, but I know that on some, you know, I have a rule on Jubilee that says we don't drink during the race. And then I say, unless it's a very long leg. Certainly, this is a great opportunity to spend time with friends out on the water. I mean, there's just no better place to be in my mind, out on the Chesapeake Bay on a Wednesday night with the sun going down and so forth. So I just want people to think about, you know, what is your goal? What are your expectations when you leave the dock each day? And prepare yourself accordingly, and your crew. That's that comment there. So next slide. If you saw my email, you know, or the forum post, I was talking about the dance. And this is something that I try to get figured out early in the season. Get the crew out for a practice. If you can, get out on the water early before the start. And the key to not just getting around the course efficiently and you know, as quickly as possible, because that's the goal in a race for most of us, not all of us. But the thrill of whether you win or not at the end of the race will be that you didn't screw up, you know, because if you're screwing up, people get bitter and the captain starts grumbling and you know, and hopefully the captain doesn't start yelling. But it's amazing how practicing and developing your dance moves on tacking, you know, who's moving at what time, where are you sitting on the rail, if you're the tailer, if you're the grinder, on the weather leg, who's going to get into the cockpit first, where are you going to stand, what are the signals that the captain or the helm will be using to indicate when the tack will take place, and get this down so that it's repeatable and everybody understands what's going on. So get your dance move down for the tacking and also for the jibing. Tacking incredibly important to make sure you get a good tack. And at turning marks, if you're going out to green one, you know, it's the first leg and it's upwind, you're going to get to that mark and do something. And it's usually turning left because the course will indicate that you're leaving that mark to port. So you're going to turn. Are you coming back to HHSA to go downwind, or are you reaching off to C or 83A? So what's going to happen at the turning marks? Think about that and have a plan, and make sure everybody understands the dance moves. If you're reefing or unreefing, those are things to practice on a quiet day. Reefing the main and then shaking out the reef. Have the dance moves down so that the captain, who might be the only one who has a clue, isn't talking everybody through that in the middle of a race. And so reefing or unreefing is with roller furling, Genoas and jibs and so forth, that's easy. And again, it still has to be thought about, and often results in having to move the jib car and so forth. So understand what what's required and practice that. And of course, for some of us, we're doing sail changes. What's happening if we're doing a spinnaker douse and the next leg is upwind? Practice all of that. But sail changes for most cruising boats, doing roller furling head sails isn't a factor. But for some, you're going to be out there and you're going to change from a big jib down to a smaller jib, or go from a spinnaker to a jib, or vice versa. So I just encourage you to figure out what works best on your boat. And the less time that the skipper is spending talking everybody through every maneuver, the better he can focus on doing his job. And this is really the first time I've mentioned captain. Very often the captain, the skipper, is not driving. Not very often. On some boats, the captain isn't driving. Most of the time it's the driver. Well, if the driver is spending a lot of time talking everybody through the next move, then he's not focused on his job, which is keep the boat going in the right direction, keep the boat going fast, and focus on that job, not everybody else's. So, a couple of years ago at Skippers, I was talking to one crew and said, well, we talk every time we go to Skippers, right? But I was asking somebody about how it had gone out there for them, and they'd expressed some disappointment in some of the things that had happened out there, and it turned out there was a spinnaker douse and subsequent upwind leg after a downwind leg, and it hadn't gone very well. And they talked about the skipper having spent 5 minutes of that leg talking everybody, the 6 other people on the boat, what they were going to be doing. And I said, well, what happened when we did that course last week? And, it turns out things had gone better. The difference this week was that the skipper was talking them through what they were going to do, and it didn't seem to be the same as what they had been doing last week. So here was a situation where the skipper hadn't really developed a plan, hadn't practiced anything, and made it up on the fly every time he went out there. You don't want to be that guy. You want to be the guy that has taken the crew out, figured out what's going to work best, and what works best on my boat isn't going to work on your boat or on somebody else's boat. So you need to figure out, given how your boat is set up and given your crew, what's the best way to get the job done. So that's my story on that. Make sense? So I think, are we at the point where we want to
Yep.
Yeah. So we're going to go into a rules discussion. Any questions about what we've talked about up to this point? Anything in the chat there, Jason?
Nope.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
Anybody?
What if I'm a girl? Mark says, what if I'm a girl?
Mark's not a girl. I haven't directed this presentation in any way differentiating roles for males and females. Jubilee, and if you've seen us out there, sometimes we're out there with more women than there are men. I'm completely comfortable and in fact encourage mixing genders on the boat. I just think it, and more about that next week, but how the crew gels and how they work together is so important. Nobody that I know of is paying their crew to come out. So you better make sure they're having a good time. So that's my word on that. There's no difference in the way I talk to my crew or talk to other people, whether you're a male or a female. This all applies. And it turns out, it's hard to generalize, but I do find that that many of our women crew are better focused throughout the course of the race than some of their male counterparts. So I'm good. Mark, does that answer your question?
Keith, there was another question by Peter about how many times you practice before the first race.
Yep.
Good.
Yep. Peter's asking how many times you, Keith, practice on Jubilee before your first race.
Well, well, we're going out on the 11th of April with looks like 9 or 10 crew members are showing up for a practice day. They're also going to get a barbecue at the house afterwards, so there'll be dark and stormy and maybe a burger or something afterwards. But and then reserving the 18th, weather dependent, to maybe go out again. You know, when I've had Jubilee for 15 years, and when Emily has reminded me of this and encouraged me to, you know, do this again. We used to practice a lot more when we were new to the boat, and we do that less now. And as much as anything else, it's, you know, because as soon as the race is finished, I'm putting those expensive sails away. Now, if you've got a Dacron sail, it's going to last you 20 years. If you've got a black sail like I have, you know, and you can get 3 years out of it, then, you know, you think yourself lucky. But really, the importance of practice cannot be overstated. And so we are going to go back to practicing. If we can leave the dock early enough, and, you know, with the early starts now, it's a bit hard to get all the crew there early enough for us to get out of Harrington Harbour North, get out to the starting area in time to do any serious practice. But after the race, especially with the early starts and therefore the earlier finishes, there's enough daylight to leave the sails up, turn around, go out, practice some jibes, practice some you know, bear away sets, some jibe sets, and do jibe after jibe after jibe. So we will do more of that this year. So it doesn't matter what boat you have, practice makes perfect. And it's not just about, you know, getting the sails up and you know, going off in the direction you're supposed to go. And I'll talk more about this next week. It's figuring out how to make your boat go as well as it possibly can, given the constraints or the, you know, features of your boat. So practice, 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 especially early in the season.
Emily comments, it says, we certainly practice taking a few times before the race, making sure that the positions are good and that the crew practices the dance of how to move during attack, which is good.
Okay.
We also have a designated practice race on the 21st of April and a practice afternoon on the 24th, which will be an opportunity to just at least have some guided, if you don't know what to do while you're going out and practicing, we'll have some guided, okay, do this for a little bit while, and we'll be watching each other and helping each other on that. That's Saturday the 24th.
Yeah.
At a minimum.
Really encourage that. I would invite you all to you know, refill the Bloody Marys or grab a cup of coffee, and we'll take about a 5-minute break, and then we'll talk about some rules. Sound good? Okay.
I'm gonna mute here. There you go. Keith, you're live again.
So if we're ready to get started again. So basic rules of the road. So we're not going to talk about the vast majority of the book. We're just going to focus on the things that people need to have a fairly good handle on in order to safely conduct themselves out on the race course in our club situations. And, you know, I want to stress that here at Harrington Harbour, we're hopefully a little more laid back than if you were to go to Annapolis and get involved in some of the racing up there. A little more intense, a little bit more skippers yelling at other skippers, boats yelling at each other, and so forth. But so down here, we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page and following the rules, because there's some expectation that if you're out there on a Wednesday night and you're in close quarters with other boats, that you have a bit of an idea of who's supposed to be doing what. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. And again, this is not going to be an in-depth, you know, if there's questions, by all means, shoot them over. But this is not intended to be an in-depth exploration of the rules, because there are so many nuances. I attended some seminars over the winter, and, you know, my head was spinning with these guys, Dave Dellenbaugh and Dave Perry and others, talking about the rules. Because there are people out there who try to exploit the rules to use it to their advantage. And that's not what we encourage down here. We just want to make sure that people are following the rules of the road, basically. So that's the focus of today's chat. We're going to deal with basically rules 10 through 20. Which is most of part 2. There's a couple of rules, 1 or 2 rules that, in part C at the end that we're not going to talk about, rules 21 and 22, which has to do with capsized boats and things like that. We're not going to see any capsized boats out here on Herringbag, right? So let's get to the start. And so, you know, try to simplify this with some diagrams. And one of the other things that and I make this point at the end of this presentation, if you're new to rules, or even if you're not, you're sort of just freshening your understanding of the rules, don't try to remember the rules by the rule number. It's hard to do that. Remember the rules or understand the rules based upon, for example, port and starboard. Who has right of way? We have, you know, a port tack boat. The blue boat on the left is on port, and the yellow boat is on starboard. So understand in that situation that the port tack boat has to avoid by either ducking and going behind, or tacking to stay out of the way of, without interfering with, the starboard tack boat. Pretty simple, right? Here's a situation on the right, however, where, you know, sometimes it's not really clear who's on port and who's on starboard. If both boats in this situation sailing dead downwind, then the port and starboard is determined by where the boom is. And so, whereas, you know, theoretically, you're looking at the windward side of the boat, right? The side of the boat from which the wind is blowing, to figure out a boat on port and starboard. In this situation, because the yellow boat has the boom over on port, he is considered to be on starboard. And so the boat ahead is really obligated to stay out of the way of the starboard tack boat. Now, I'll tell you what I would do in this situation. I would flop the boom over on the blue boat and also be on starboard. And then you have a situation which is completely different, which says that the overtaking boat has to keep clear of the boat that he's overtaking. So anyway, these are nuances. There's other situations. I wonder if I can draw this, see if this will work. You know, we sometimes have a situation where a downwind boat and with the wind coming from this direction, I'll get out of the way in a minute, with the wind coming from here, you've got a downwind boat on starboard and an upwind boat also on starboard, right? So the boom is going to be on the port side, wind coming from this direction. So we've got one boat going upwind. Can we see this? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one boat coming downwind. In this situation, windward-leeward rules apply. So, and this is sometimes a little hard to figure out, especially if you're the upwind boat and you're looking at a boat that's coming at you downwind. Have a look and see where the boom is to know whether or not that boat is also on starboard, and if so, then the upwind boat, the boat sailing downwind, has to keep clear by virtue of the rule that says the windward boat stays clear of the leeward boat. So, back to our presentation. Here we go. On the same tack, we talked about that. Windward boat keeps clear of the leeward boat, and when approaching from behind, the boat clear astern must keep clear of the boat clear ahead. So those are rules, and you can see up in the top left-hand corner, 10, 11, and 12. And these are the rules that most often are in play, especially in the start. So understand these rules and understand, looking at another boat, what that boat is doing, port, starboard, and so forth. Next slide. And so here we're talking about rules 13 and 14. And this is one to be careful of. 13, it says, when you're tacking, you're sort of in limbo. You don't have any rights. And so we can see that the boat on the right there, the blue boat, with the sails flapping, hasn't really established whether or not he's on port or starboard or windward or leeward. And so he's vulnerable, and his obligation is to make sure he stays clear of any other boats. And so when he turns completely onto port tack, he will then be the leeward boat. And then, you know, windward-leeward rules apply. Now, Rule 14 says, don't hit me, don't hit anyone else. It's in there because even if you're not at fault and there's a collision, if you haven't taken some effort to avoid that collision, then you've broken Rule 14. And breaking Rule 14 is really a no-no. So you can be in the right, but still be penalized and disqualified if you hit another boat and you haven't taken any avoiding action. So, important one. All right. Next slide. Any questions? No? Okay. Easy, huh? So now we're getting just a little bit more complicated. Rules 15 and 16. Rule 15 says that when you're acquiring a right of way, there's some limitations. So if you clear astern, you've got to keep clear of the boat clear ahead. But if you acquire an overlap, there's some limitation, and it's not really described here in this slide, but there's a rule that says, and let me read it to you. It says, yeah, the rule says unless she acquires right away because of the other boat's action. But the other thing is that if you acquire an overlap from behind and you establish that overlap within 2 boat lengths distance away from the other boat, then you're not allowed to sail above your proper course. And so there are a couple of rules that mention proper course. And in many situations, there is no such thing as proper course. Proper course, you know, by definition says is the course you would sail to get around the course as quickly and as efficiently as possible in the absence of other boats. Well, if you're lucky enough to be out there and there's no other boats around, that's great. But invariably in a race, there's other boats around. And so I've heard this, this situation being described as if you come in the back door, and the back door is a line across the stern of the boat in front of you, and it extends 2 boat lengths, and I think boat lengths are assigned to the largest of the 2 boats. So if, you know, if one boat's a 30-footer and the other boat's a 40-footer, then it's 2 40-foot boat lengths. So if you come in that back door, establish an overlap, don't start calling that windward boat up. You have no right to do so. You can sail your proper course. And here's what's a little tricky. If both boats are hard on the wind, and not in this situation as indicated by the diagrams, but you know, proper course is different for different boats. And so the windward boat, if he's hard on the wind and he's you know, a Catalina 27 and the boat establishing the overlap from below is a Beneteau first 36.7, then their points of sail are going to be different. So here we would hope that we're not going to create too much consternation by trying to make a Catalina 27 come up. But if you're in this situation, it's going to be hard to get by a boat of equal size anyway, but if you do, just don't mess with him if you come in from behind close to the other boat. Now, when a right-of-way boat does, so if in a windward leeward situation, if the leeward boat decides that he wants to change course, he can't make that change without giving the other boat the opportunity to keep clear, to get out of the way or do something to avoid contact. So you don't have this, you know, ability or a right to just turn towards somebody else because you have rights. So that's what that rule is talking about.
Keith, there's a question there too, more to the last one. Bill asks, is screaming at the other boat considered taking evasive action?
Screaming at the other boat?
No.
No. Taking evasive action. So was this with Rule 14?
Yes.
Oh, so screaming at the other boat to get out of the way doesn't relieve you of your obligation to not hit that boat. If you're so inclined, then pull out your red flag and hail protest, but don't hit the other boat, because hitting the other boat is a no-no. And you know, there have been situations out there where, for one reason or another, it's been impossible to avoid hitting another boat. And there's a new rule, in fact, this year in the RRS 43.1 that talks about exoneration. And so there are situations where hitting a mark or hitting another boat, provided there isn't damage or injury, you can be exonerated if you were forced into that situation by the actions of another boat. But I would just encourage everybody to do whatever they can to avoid hitting boats. It's, you know, the noise is so unwelcome, and and the possibility of getting hurt is very real. And then there's, you know, repairs. You just don't want to have to be dealing with the other boat's insurance company or your insurance company. And you don't want to put any marks on your pretty boats.
Keith, I would add to that, and the rules actually prohibit communications between boats except certain circumstances of a hail. And anything other than that is considered a courtesy, and that's it. But it's not considered in the rules.
Yeah, right, as far as the rules are concerned.
Right.
However, courtesy communications between boats, I encourage it. You know,
Yes,
if you're in a
agreed.
port starboard situation, you might call out to the other boat, or certainly if you're the starboard boat and they don't seem to be reacting, then you're going to be letting them know that you're on starboard and you have rights. However, there are situations out there where if you're the port tack boat, you want to make sure that you let the other boat know that I understand I have to give you, you know, give way to you, and here's what I'm going to do. So courtesy communications are encouraged.
Yes.
Yelling and screaming at the other boat is very much discouraged. All right.
The starboard boat can also let the port boat know that it's okay to cross.
Yes,
Mhm.
right. Oh yeah, and that's, Michelle just made the point. Sometimes if you're the starboard tack boat and there's a port tacker ahead of you, you may not want that boat to tack on you. And so you'll say, I'll call out to that port tack boat and say, hold your course, I'm going behind you. You know, there are strategic reasons sometimes for not forcing a port tack boat to do something to get out of your way. Just let them go, because you want to get to the right-hand side of the course or the left-hand side of the course, whatever it happens to be, and let them go. All right. This is the next one. So we're talking about rules 17 and 18.4. And so this again is talking about, you know, the windward boat has to keep clear, but if you've obtained, we've already talked about that, if you've come in through the back door, you can't sail above proper course until you're clear of that and the overlap is broken. And then here we have a situation where there's a downwind rounding and the windward leeward rule does not apply when you're in the zone and going around a mark. So when you get into this situation, it's rule 18.4, and rule 18 deals with who has rights in the event of an overlap at a turning mark. And so at the mark, when the inside boat who has right of way and cannot be prevented from rounding the mark, but if the next leg of the course would be, in the absence of another boat, would be to jibe, then the inside boat, whilst he's being given mark room, his obligation or her obligation is to jibe and not take that yellow boat to the moon. So that's what that rule is talking about. So it's trying to make people play nice at the turning marks.
Keith, Peter asks, what is the zone?
Ah, good. So the zone is, unless it's changed in the sailing instructions, it by default is a 3 boat length circle that's drawn around a mark. And so again, two different boats approaching, or many boats approaching the mark with overlaps. The zone boat length circle is determined by, or the diameter of that, the radius, I guess, of that is determined by the largest of the boats involved in an overlap situation approaching a mark, upwind or downwind. And so the 3 boat length circle is the zone. Little hard sometimes to figure out where the zone starts and ends. The rules, however, give some leeway to the boat that's getting to the zone first. And it says that if there's any doubt about whether or not an overlap was established before the, as the boats hit the edge of the zone, then it's assumed that the overlap was not established. So, you know, if somebody's several boat lengths away from you, you're approaching the mark together, the boat in front insists that there is no overlap, the boat behind says, yes, there is an overlap, then the rules state that if there's any doubt, then the assumption is that there was no overlap established. All right.
Andy says, Keith, I thought the zone is based on the length of the boat that reaches it first, not the largest of the overlapped boats.
Who said that?
Andy Harvey.
Andy Harvey. Yeah, I believe it's the largest of the boats involved in the overlap.
It's Keith, this is Hank. It is the boat that hits the boundary first.
Is it?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. I told you I'm not an expert. I'm just, you know, all the way through this in the hope that somebody's keeping me honest.
It's the first boat to the 3 boat length circle.
All right.
And the condition only applies at that point. If another boat is blazing in and the leading boat is already inside the circle, then the guy inside does not have to give room. It only counts when you cross the line.
Can you repeat that,
So-
please, Wes?
Hank, could you say that again, please?
Speak
Okay.
up.
The 3 boat length boundary is kind of like a line in the water that you go through. And that's where the determination is made that you have to give mark room or not give mark room. So it occurs when the first boat of the 2 boats that are, you know, that are going to the mark, when the nearest boat crosses that line, the 3 boat length line, and there's no overlap on him, and that boat continues into, you know, close to the mark, and the boat behind him catches up and establishes an overlap.
Oh, yeah.
The boat does not have to give him room anymore, even though he's
Yeah.
overlapped.
Right.
So it's only when you cross the boundary, you make the decision, I got to give room or I don't have to give room.
Yeah. Yep. And I just checked the at the front of the RRS. Used to be in the back, but it's in the front now. That all of the definitions and the definition of zone, anything that in the RRS, which is in italics, indicates that there's a definition for that somewhere. So
Yeah.
the definition of zone is in fact the 3 boat length circle established by the first boat to reach the zone. So good on you, Andy Harvey. Paying attention.
Vita asks, what if you lose the overlap inside the zone?
Yeah.
That's starting to get a pretty complicated.
No, but it's very
It's
clear
a good.
that if when
question.
you get to that, the first boat reaches the zone, and keep in mind that, you know, if there are 3 boats that are overlapped, then all of the rules apply as though there were only 2. So multiple boats with overlaps are obligated to understand this rule. But when you reach the zone, what was the question? Because I think
What if you lose the overlap
Yeah.
inside the zone?
Okay, so as Hank pointed out, if the boat clear behind gets inside and establishes an overlap after entering the circle, that boat has no rights, because the first boat to reach the circle gets to have the right to round that mark without interference. And even if the overlap is broken after the boats enter the zone, the boat that was in front and entitled to room continues to have the right to round that mark without interference. So The rule continues until the boats have rounded the mark. So changing situations inside the zone do not change the application of the rule. Is that clear?
One thing that, especially on leeward marks,
There is when it's a leeward mark, there is a tricky situation. Two boats are going downwind. One is approaching the mark on starboard and the other is approaching on port. However, the boat that's ahead, suppose the boat is heading toward the mark on port tack and it's a port rounding, and a boat is coming in on starboard tack. And so that boat is going to be overlapped as they get close from maybe, a long distance because they're coming on opposite tacks heading to the mark. So the boat that gets there first is going to have to give mark room, no matter what the port and starboard situation is.
Yep, sure. So this is, and I think we get to that in the next slide, but to be clear, yes, the windward leeward rule, the port starboard rule is thrown out, are thrown out when boats are approaching a downwind turning mark. And so the overlap situation, sometimes it's hard to figure out whether there's an overlap or not. But believe me, two boats that are on a collision course approaching a mark on different tacks or different jibes are overlapped. So if that's the situation, just be aware that the first boat to reach the zone is the one entitled to room, mark room. Thanks, Hank. All right. What's next?
So Hank, this is Les. I wish we would have had this discussion before last year when you did the right thing and I didn't. We kept clear, but I came inside you, and but I made it up to you for in one of the future races. But thanks for that, and I sent you a note there too. That's a hard rule to get your hands around, but these are good descriptions and scenarios.
Good. You're welcome, and thank you. So here's the discussion about mark room. And so, and at the bottom it says, at a leeward mark, this rule also applies when boats are overlapped on opposite tacks, opposite jibes. So, it's the situation on the left is a boat's approaching a weather mark. So that's an upwind mark. The rule also applies, as Hank pointed out, to a leeward mark, and the windward leeward situation does not apply until those boats have rounded the mark. And so inside boat is entitled to mark room. Good?
For our beginners out there, just give mark room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a boat, and if you don't think you should have, raise your red flag, and let's talk about it later.
Yeah.
But just give mark room.
If there's a learning opportunity. Yeah, so that was Michelle saying that, if there's any doubt and there's an overlap, just give the boat that's closest to the mark, give that boat room to round the mark safely and stay out of the way, and get him on the next leg.
Another thing to add, especially in our races, we often stack up. It's not just the boat you're overlapped with, it's all the chain of overlapped boats. So you might be the outside boat, but there might be other boats on the inside that are entitled other rooms. So you got to be looking all the way down to the mark and make sure everyone has room to give room.
All right, can we move on?
Yep.
Yep. Let's see what else we got here. On opposite tacks at the windward mark. So this is important, and it comes into play a lot, especially with the non-spin boats, where the performance and the abilities of the boats are all you know, somewhat similar, and it's not unusual to see, and I love to see this situation where boats, you know, especially at the first mark, they're arriving together. And here at Harrington Harbour, we always try and set, with few exceptions, we try to set that first leg as an upwind mark. You know, we set the line square to the wind, as near as we can without, you know, going crazy. And we try to have that starting line downwind of the first mark. And so when you get to that first mark, you're tacking. And so Rule 18 does not apply to boats on a beat to windward on different tacks. Until both boats are on the same tack inside the zone, which we've discussed previously, Rule 18 turns on. So in this situation, you know, on the left, port starboard, you have the port boat must keep clear. And if he decides to tack inside that 3-boat zone, then he needs to understand that he throws away all rights to get around that mark without interfering with other boats nearby, also in the zone. So if in getting safely around the mark, he interferes with the boat behind, as in the case of the yellow boat, if that yellow boat has to change course. Now, the old rule used to say that if you, and that's what this text is indicating, used to say that if you force that boat to sail above close hauled to avoid hitting her, then you've fouled that boat. I think the new rule puts a little more onus on the tacking boat to stay out of the way of others, to say that if the other boat has to change course dramatically to avoid hitting you, then you've broken the rule. It also says that if you cause that boat to hit the mark, trying to avoid you, then that boat will be exonerated from breaking Rule 31 because it was forced into that situation by a boat that tacked inside the zone. So the thing I'll say about this, just to keep it simple, is if you're approaching the weather mark and you tack close to it, close to other boats, just be very careful that you stay out of their way and don't interfere with their ability to round the mark without forcing them to do anything unnatural. Is that clear? Good. Any questions? No? All right. So what else have we got? So at an obstruction, this you know, doesn't come into play a lot down here at Harrington. Just be aware that there are shallows off Holland Point. So around the corner on the right from, you know, if you're coming out of Harrington Harbour South, the depth gets down to under 6 feet in what appears to be perfectly navigable water. And for a boat like Jubilee with a 7'3" keel, if we're in that situation, you know, we're the yellow boat trying to get around Holland Point, we're going to be asking for room to do something to get away from those shallows. So sometimes asking for room isn't always obvious to the other boat, but if you're watching your depth sounder, you might understand. The situation where we have, we see it a lot. We have a boat that's anchored out fishing, 2 boats approaching. Obviously the leeward boat, the blue boat, has right of way with the windward leeward rule. And just be aware that if you're going to change course to get around that boat, and you pass to leeward of that anchored boat, the blue boat has to give, if you decided that as the right-of-way boat that you're going to pass to leeward of that anchored boat or that obstruction, then your obligation is to also give room to the inside boat to make the same choice around that boat. Don't see that a lot, but if you are in that situation, just be aware of the courtesy required to make sure that boats can pass safely past an obstruction.
The fish traps, encounter those. as
Oh yeah,
obstructions.
there you go. The fish traps. Jason just pointed out the fish weirs out there north of HHSA and in the vicinity of 83A. So some obligation to take care of your close sailing boat nearby. And what's it say? Oh yeah. So anyway, I think we've covered that.
Les had a question about Rule 13 wall tacking also applied based on timing. Les, can you put that question in context?
Well, it goes back to when Keith said if there's any questions, and I only thought about it after he moved on, was and with that one boat coming inside the other coming around the mark, if they're in the action of tacking that blue boat during that tack, doesn't Rule 13 say they have no rights?
Yeah, sure.
And
However, if he completes the tack, as in the situation here, but and so it's now on starboard, but in doing so, he's going to slow down, right? So somebody's steaming in on starboard, having hit the ley line correctly from out there, he's going to, the blue boat is going to slow down. And if in doing this maneuver, he forces the yellow boat to do something unnatural, and the yellow boat, if he's going to hit if he's in danger of hitting the blue boat, he can either turn up into the wind, which means that he's sailing above his proper course, and that's a no-no, or he can turn down, right? His choice may be to turn down to avoid hitting the blue boat. And if in doing so, you know, the yellow boat hits the mark, then exoneration comes in and blue boat has broken the rule.
So Keith, maybe it'd be, if I'm reading this right, what the blue boat here did was lee bow the yellow boat.
Yeah.
So the rule says you can't lee bow someone in the zone, is I think what it's trying to get at. Might be a simple way to say it.
Yeah, well, if you try to lee bow somebody, make sure that you can complete your tack,
Right.
and get around that mark without forcing
Right.
the boat behind you to have to change course.
Right.
thanks.
So yes, Rule 13 applies, but the rule really here is talking about having completed the tack, make sure you haven't interfered with somebody else. All right. So the obstruction thing, I think, what's the one on the right? Move that thing. Is it? Hang on. We've got something on our screen that. Can you just move that?
It's not letting me.
Oh, I think the boat clear astern has no rights.
There we go.
Oh yeah, that's right. So it simply says that if you're passing the shallows on Holland Point, don't try to get between a boat clear ahead of you and establish an overlap. And then start calling them up. The rule says, hey, if there's an obstruction there that you have to worry about, don't get between another boat and that obstruction. That's all that. Okay. All right. So, we don't have the situation where we've got lots of ugly rocks on the race course. That will happen in other places, but again, we can have anchored boats and other, you know, continuing instructions out there on the race course. And if you're the yellow boat and if you don't change course, you're going to hit something, go aground, or you know, hit an obstruction, then you have a right to ask for room to tack. And the other boat's obligation is to do one of two things. The blue boat can indicate his understanding of the hail and call back U tack, in which case the yellow boat is entitled to tack, and by the way, should tack right away. You don't want to be crying wolf, hey, I need to tack, and then you get permission to tack and you don't tack. So if you're calling for room at an obstruction, the blue boat's obligation is to do one of two things: call back U tack, or immediately tack so that the yellow boat can safely tack out of harm's way. We don't see that often around here, but it's a useful rule to keep in mind in situations where somebody's going to hit something if you don't change course.
Keith, I've seen this one come up where the obstruction is a starboard tacked boat and you have two port tacked boats.
Yeah, right. So that it gets a bit tricky.
Yeah, it does.
You know, and that's a situation going back to Rule 19, where the two boats on port tack have an obligation to keep clear of the starboard tack boat, but the boat that has the right of way has the obligation to allow both boats to make a choice about which side to pass the mark. So, yeah, it's just using common sense, really.
Yep.
And you know, not screwing with somebody else on the race course. You know, so one of the other things in the rules says that if I'm on a beat to windward in the spinnaker class, and coming downwind is some boats from another class on a different leg, then you know, I should make some attempt not to screw with boats on a different course, and especially if they're in a different class, on a different leg rather. So, you know, we're just trying to get everybody to play nice out there. The rule is further, you know, refined by saying that if you're sailing your proper course, then, you know, you'd like to see the other boats stay out of your way and follow the rules of the road regulations. So what else have we got? Oh yeah, so here again, I said at the beginning, don't try to remember the rules verbatim or by the rule number. Call them as you see them. Port starboard, windward leeward, etc. You know, overlapped and not overlapped. I think it's easier to get a handle on doing the right thing if you simply talk about not rule number 10 or rule number 13. Good for you if you can remember that. I'm not smart enough to do that. But remember the rules by the situation, and then talk about the rules with your crew. If you've just had a port starboard situation, you know, you don't want a lot of idle chatter on the boat for the most part, but it's worth making a note of, hey, that was a situation where this rule, you know, the port starboard rule or the windward leeward rule was in play, and here's how how that played out. And did we do the right thing? Was there a question about whether or not the other boat did the right thing? So just conversation without trying to be a rules expert and remember all of the rules verbatim. Stay calm and don't yell. Don't yell at your crew and don't yell at other boats unless you're trying to get their attention. You know, starboard, up, up, up. You'll hear that at the start. And then here's the point, you know, if you're out there racing, you know, for my part, if I see a boat out there that I haven't seen racing before, I'm going to assume that they're, you know, a novice, or that they're new to racing, and they're certainly new to racing at Harrington Harbour Sailing Association's events, and I'm going to give them plenty of room and respect. But basically, you know, people expect that you know what you're doing, and if you're a starboard tack boat approaching a port tack boat, you have right of way. That starboard tack boat should not take avoiding action unless a collision is imminent. So you're going to confuse a port tack boat. If you're a starboard tack boat with a right of way and you start taking avoiding action, unless, as I said, Rule 14 is in play, which says don't hit another boat. So if a port tack boat isn't responding and staying clear, then do whatever you have to do. But if you're the right-of-way boat, take your right-of-way, because that's what people expect and hope for. And then I make the point, sailing is a non-contact sport, but at times boats are very close, and this can be intimidating when you're out there for the first time, or if you haven't done this a lot. It can be very intimidating. Hopefully, you're not sailing in the spinnaker class where there's a little bit more, experience, and the competitive juices are flowing pretty hard at the start. But if you're in the non-spin cruising class, or in the non-spin racing class, which basically is a split between boats based upon the sail area to displacement ratio. But hopefully things are pretty calm back there, and if you're getting close to each other, you're not doing anything crazy, making sharp turns and freaking out. So get comfortable with sailing close to other boats, and don't put yourself in harm's way until you feel confident, not only with your own ability as the skipper or the driver, but also the ability of your crew to be safe out there, make changes based upon the evolving situations at the start of the race and as the race unfolds. And keep it fun. It better be fun, and if it's not, your crew's not going to keep coming back. And if you're making it life miserable for other boats on the race course, then you're not operating within the spirit of how we conduct racing down here at Harrington Harbour. So what else have we got?
So,
question on it? Oh,
Keith, a comment from Les. Says we try to have race cues on, then discuss tactics and what rules applied in a dock debrief, as well as mention live. I try and use race cues too. I don't know if you've started using it. That's a great app for that.
Yeah,
it's free.
Every now and again, Emily remembers to turn it on. And so race cues, for those that don't know, is an app that you can download. I think it's free.
It is free.
Yeah, it's free. And when you turn it on before the race starts, your phone, with its built-in GPS, will record what you're doing on the race course. And it also is smart enough to know whether you're on an upwind leg or a reaching leg or a downwind leg. And it can be a great learning tool. It can also be a source of great embarrassment to find out that you went the wrong way, and the boat that beat you, was doing something different but doing it well. But so a great learning tool to talk about after the race is over, even the next day, or back at the bar. So after the races are finished, and hopefully this year with COVID getting more under control, with more and more people being vaccinated, I know that about half of the crew on Jubilee is either fully vaccinated or had the first shot, and within another week or two will have had the second shot. So as more and more of us become vaccinated, we don't drop our guards, and I'm not trying to be Anthony Fauci here. We still make sensible choices and keep ourselves and each other and others safe. But I'm hoping we can put more on the boat this year, and that there will be the opportunity to meet after the races to tell our sailing lies and have a rum drink with our other competitors. That's the nice thing about this sport, is the people you meet, and it's a team sport. So it's in my mind one of the great ways to enjoy time away from the rest of life, from the office, from home, etc. But you can also do this with anything that you own. Any boat you own can basically be taken out onto the race course and sail for enjoyment. Now, not every boat's going to win. That's not the point for a lot of people. There's no other sport that I know of where you can run what you brung and be competitive and be safe and have a lot of fun. You're not taking, you know, your minivan to Watkins Glen and run it around the race course. So anyway,
let's put the link up there for everyone for race cues, and you can also set lately you can set an alarm on it to automatically start your tracking every Wednesday, which is what I try to remember to do.
Yeah.
There's another question from Jane. Is flying the class flag compulsory, and what about sail numbers?
No and no. So we encourage people, as I indicated earlier, to put a flag on the backstay. And at the beginning of the year, it's probably makes more sense than later in the year, where everybody sort of knows who's who and what class they're sailing in. But at the beginning of the season, if you've got a 6 flag and you're flying and you're going to be competing in the spinnaker class, put that 6 flag on the backstay so that everybody else knows that you're sailing in that class and you're going to be the first class to start. And just for courtesy to other competitors, it's nice if you've got a 5 flag to put it on the backstay. It's not required, and I don't think we would ever do that. If you go to Annapolis, there is an obligation requirement, and you can be protested by the race committee if you don't have your class flags flying. Some of them say on the bow and the backstay. And then sail numbers, we have never insisted on boats having sail numbers. And so, you know, if you're a Beneteau 381, then your sail number is 338.1 probably. But or a Catalina 27, your sail number is going to be the Catalina logo and 27. So it's helpful, but you know, you got to take the main off. You got to take it to a sail maker. You've got to apply. If you haven't already done so, you have to apply for your sail number. So you know, it can be a pain in the ass. And if you don't have a sail number, that's just fine, because we're going to identify you by, you know, the name of the boat or the logo that we see every week on your sail.
Call the RC when you approach the finish line.
Or what?
Call the race committee when you approach the finish line.
Yeah.
So
right.
I think just to clarify something that Keith said about numbers, you can pick any sail number you want if you just want to have a number on the sails. If you want to compete in sanctioned races, you have to have an official sail number, which you apply for and pay. That's a difference. You can put any number you want on your sails, just they have to be sanctioned if you want to compete officially and compete for bigger races.
I don't
What's the
have a
next slide?
registered sail number on Cantata, and I've been competing in CBYRA races for 20 years with just my sail number, with my hull number on the sail, and I haven't had no problem.
Yep.
So those are sanctioned, as long as
I
you-
misused the
when
term
you
sanctioned, but
sign
yeah.
up, when you register for the race, you use whatever sail number you're using.
If you're going to do the international races, for example, like Annapolis to Bermuda, you have to have a number assigned by the national authority.
Oh, I see. The internationals. Okay.
Yep.
So anyway, I can't believe we're coming up on 2 hours. That blows my mind. I hope everybody has enjoyed the presentation, that there was some useful information included. And this is just a recap. These are the things, and now's the time to do it, right? A couple of weeks away. All of the sailing instructions and the racing rules and so forth have been published.
Yep.
They're on the website. Go grab them, download them, and print them. So read the sailing instructions, understand the starting sequence, be comfortable, and get into the habit of checking weather, and understand the effects that current can have out there on the race course. Get your dance moves nailed down. I used to have it was a Word document, and I tried to record from what I understood and about every position. And I wrote it down, and when people came onto the boat, I gave them the cheat sheet for, here's what this job does. And it accomplished a couple of things. It forced me to think about everybody else's job on the boat, but if you hand that to people, it affords them the opportunity to, if they're coming onto the boat to be, you know, a jib trimmer or to do pit or something like that, it'll describe their responsibilities, but also the responsibilities of others. And that's the best way to get your crew working seamlessly together and efficiently is to not just know the job that you've assigned them to, but also understand what everybody else is doing, because, you know, it takes a village to get these boats around the track. And then, as I said, get a handle on the basic rules. You don't have to buy the RRS. You can download them from US Sailing, ussailing.org. You'll find a link to the rules. You can download a PDF document, or you can order them from US Sailing. It's not very expensive, and there's some expectation that when you're sailing, even at Harrington Harbour, you'll have our racing rules on the boat for reference. But if you sail outside Herring Bay, there's an expectation or obligation to have a copy of the racing rules on board, you know, along with, you know, PFDs and, you know, other other stuff you need to have, rum, medicinal purposes, rum. So
Keith, there were a couple other questions,
Yeah.
you know, that came in late. One from Margaret, who's asking, what happens if you snag the anchor? Or was it a question?
the anchor line for the signal boat.
What have I do? Snag the anchor rode at the starting pin? Because Margaret and I have never done that. Neither of us, never ever done that.
So the rule says you can't hit a race committee boat or a mark, otherwise you break a rule. What it goes on to say is that the anchor rode isn't a mark. So if you snag the anchor rode and can get yourself free without hitting or touching or pushing off the signal boat or the race committee boat, then you haven't broken a rule.
She was also in a separate message asking, when is she obligated to retire in general? When are you obligated to retire in a race?
When you run out of rum. No. So if you've broken a rule that resulted in a collision that caused damage or resulted in an injury to a crew member, then your obligation is to retire. If you've broken a rule out there on the race course and somebody's pulled the red flag and hailed protest, there's a couple of choices that you have. The first choice is to take your medicine and do your penalty turn. You know, RRS says 1 turn for hitting a mark. That's RRS 31. That's a 1 turn penalty. But for other infractions of Part 2, there's 2 turns defined. I think here at Harrington Harbour, didn't we change that and say?
There's no, we just say, we
We
unchanged
used-
it. Yeah, there's, we
we used-
unchanged it.
We used to say that in the interest of encouraging people to take their medicine, we'll just make it a 1 turn penalty, because, you know, doing 1 turn invariably puts you back behind the boat that you just fouled. And
I thought the rule said it's 1 turn unless the penalty was in the vicinity of a mark or a curve.
there you go.
Then
Those are all out of our rules now, though.
They're not.
Pardon?
Not in our rules
No,
anymore?
correct. They're not in our rules. There's no penalty.
No,
rules
that's
in
in the RRS, I thought, unless it's changed.
I'll have to look at it. It's
What did he say?
he was asking about the RRS about the penalties 1 versus 2. It's
it's
1 for a mark and 2 for
No, hitting a mark is
Infraction of
1.
Part 2.
But
What's
when
that?
you foul another boat in the vicinity of a mark, like during a rounding, then it's 2. And then other fouls, out on the course, it's just 1.
No, it's any violation of Rule 2, regardless of where you are, is a 2-turn,
So
Okay.
with
Hank,
exceptions.
yeah, so Hank, Jason is telling me that we took out the something I had introduced several years ago, which was alternative penalties. And whilst RRS does talk about being able to apply alternative penalties, it can only be done if the notice of race or the, pardon me, the sailing instructions invoke the alternative penalties. So if we're not referencing alternative penalties, then by default, we go to RRS, which says that 1 turn for Rule 31 and 2 turns for all other Part 2 infractions.
Okay, thanks.
I've always heard that, or been advised that if protested, which I haven't been at in any of the HHSA races, so cordial. There's several times I should have been, but if ever protested, just take the penalty turn and it's an
Yeah.
investment.
Yeah, take your medicine.
Oh, that's what the medicine is. I thought it was that rusty drink.
So yeah, there's been a couple of times when I've been protested, and I knew that number one, either I didn't break the rule or I was unable to respond because of the presence of another boat, and so in the old days that wasn't really the way to do it. The way to do it would be to go to the room and request exoneration based upon the circumstances. And the only way exoneration could be sort of administered was by the protest committee. The new RRS for this year says that if you're in a situation where you break a rule because of the actions of another boat, then you can be exonerated on the water. And there's this new rule 43.1 that, and so a couple of places in the rules where it talks about exoneration, it refers you to rule 43.1. So you can say, look, I couldn't respond, and you might have been in this. Somebody's to leeward of you calling you up, and you've got a boat about 2 feet away from you to your weather side, and they cannot respond because they've got somebody else on the other side of them. In those situations, keep your mouth shut and just suck it up and tuck in where you can, because calling up is fine, but if boats can't respond, then the rule says that if from the time that the overlap occurred and you're asking for room, if the boat that is obligated to give you room is unable to do so, then basically keep quiet.
The other side of it too is you don't have to be protested to take penalty turns, and I've certainly been there where I know I fouled another boat and I didn't have to wait to hear from it, so I took turns. Again, this is a very much, pardon the gender neutral term, but a gentlemanly sport in which we, if we know we fouled someone, we just do the right thing out there and don't wait for them to tell us that.
So, anything else?
Well, everyone should turn their mic on and give a loud applause. And thank you, Keith, for doing this.
Oh yeah.
There you
So
go. Let's hear it.
thank you.
Hey, well done.
This is next week's preview.
Thanks a lot. And here's the thing that I recommend.
Very good, thank you.
Think about now. Go out and practice, do some time and distance exercises. Listen to your boat. If the sails are flapping and making a noise, disturbing your conversation, something's wrong. We talk more about this next week, rudder position and amount of heel. You want to optimize the boat's performance by not having it on its ear, by not having to put so much helm that to correct the weather helm. You know, you turn the helm, the rudder is a big brake. You know, you stick your hand out the window of a car, and you know you've got some resistance there. You stick a big foil like a rudder into the flow of water, and you're putting on the brakes. So, you know, just think about sail trim, rudder position, amount of heel, and then watch what other people are doing. If you're going upwind and another boat that you're supposed to be, you know, either beating or, you know, staying close to, if they're higher and faster, try and figure out why. You know, it could be just that you haven't cleaned the bottom this year, but it could also be that there's some sail trim or some boat balancing with crew weight and so forth that you can try to make yourself a little bit better. So that's it. Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody dropping in.
So I'd also like to pitch the club. Thank you, Keith, and pitch the club as well. This is Jason Fox. I'm the Vice Commodore and the membership guy. There's a lot of names out there I don't recognize. So if you're not an HHSA member, go over to HHSA.org and see what we're about and consider joining. And in fact, I would like to welcome our newest member, Kate Hollingsworth. If you're still out there, she joined during the seminar. I got that email. It came in and a note.
Like an NPR fundraiser.
So yeah, as Michelle, you didn't hear him. It's
Captain
like an NPR
Boomies.
fundraiser over here.
Welcome, Captain Boomies. We're happy to have you on board.
Hang on, we'll there we go. She should be spotlighted now.
Oh, Jesus. Hi. I was not expecting that. Thank you. Yeah, no, I've been talking to Jane this whole time, actually, with the women's group, and she's running some really awesome programs. So this is, you know, I've just been bugging her to get me the right link, and now I've yelled at her to fix the link so that it actually is visible.
Yay.
Jason, we have some website input, which is nicely taken by the newest member.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the name of your boat?
I don't have one.
Okay.
Yeah, but owning boats is a terrible idea, but that's that's a whole other conversation.
But you're a professional boat captain, so.
Yeah, I used to run big white yachts back in the day. I've taught sailing. I've done a lot of ship agenting, and now I tend to teach people how to boat better because I'm in my semi-retirement, because yachts will do that for you. So let me, it's a recommendation for going yachting.
Okay.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Out here.
Thank you.